Okay, welcome back. We're here with Colton Quinn. He's a part of Nikao Group. I'm not going to steal his thunder by giving him his introduction. Welcome, Colton.
Hey, Ashley, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
Colton Quinn with Nikao Group, Vice President, Sales, Marketing, Construction, you name it.
Okay, awesome. Maybe give us a little bit about your background, you know, college, what have you, and kind of how you transitioned into sales, marketing, and then finally, obviously, this position, and then what that entails.
Oh, geez, you're asking about the start of my book or something.
Yeah,
So,
I know. I am. I am. I think it's important. It's important, right?
no, I'm joking about the book. You couldn't get me to write one if my life depended on it. I started out early. My grandfather was a brick and block mason, so we were slinging bricks as soon as we could carry one. And then it kind of snowballed from there, working for architectural firms and all kinds of cool places along the way, and wound up getting into some sports lighting and doing stadiums across the country, as well as all kinds of oddball jobs. I mean, we come from Eastern Kentucky, a little town that nobody's ever heard of, and
Okay.
you just kind of figure out how to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you get your hands in sales right after college, or how did that progress?
You know, I so the high school I went to was kind of a mixed bag. It was the mid 2000s, so there was the My Chemical Romance crowd and the
Yeah,
Jason Aldean crowd, and that
yeah.
was the dividing line. And our high school was not inclined to college per se.
Okay.
There were some kids that you knew was going to go to college, but for the rest of us, it was they were pushing us to be welders or nurses. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
is the core demographic here. So we had an awesome class doing drafting and design, and the teacher was a drafter himself, but not a teacher per se. He just found himself in the position and made us start out learning the old ways, how to do stuff on pencil and paper,
Yeah.
drawing things out, modeling things, and never ended up going to college for the most part. We had a dual credit program, so we got credits at the local community college, and
Yeah.
but I got the wild hair my junior into senior year of high school, where I found out that if you had a job that related to your technical classes in high school, you could leave school early.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay.
absolutely, no
Yeah.
problem. Sign me up.
Yeah.
And everybody else, they were trying to like figure out how McDonald's relates to auto tech, or how these goofy connections. And I was like, well, I'm doing drafting. I can draw houses. I'm just going to go walk into the local architect's office and see what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called him up, said, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Scheduled some time. It was really the first real interview I ever walked into, and it was summertime too. So I walked in shorts and a polo, not even knowing. And the guy gave me a shot, and it turned out really well. I got to work on a lot of interesting projects, and luckily, it was a very small firm. There was a secretary, an architect, a project manager, and an assistant. So
Okay.
your responsibility load could be as much as you could make it.
Right.
So I walked in like thinking, okay, I'm going to be sweeping the floors and, maybe being a gopher. And within a couple months, he was letting me draw handrails at
Oh,
a public development facility, like just all the little details of putting handrails in and making sure they were ADA compliant. And luckily, like I said, starting out doing brick and block work with Papal from the age of like 11, 12 until 17, 18, you'd learn how to read blueprints and not let the wheelbarrow full of concrete mix
yeah.
mortar get
Yeah.
knocked over. Otherwise, you got a talking to, and
Yeah.
that's a nice way of putting it. So it really just kind of fit.
Hmm.
And then I got another drafting job after that kind of internship thing ran out,
Hmm.
and I was doing mining and machinery conveyor belt accessory equipment.
Okay.
It's a drafting job, not making tons of money, but cutting your teeth. And I just keep getting these wild hairs to do more.
Sure.
So on a whim, I was applying for other jobs, trying to make more money.
Okay.
And I found this great company that I just got a kick out of called Big Ass Fans. And
Okay.
we're in Lexington, Kentucky, 2 hours away, which, you know, for us is like hop on the horse and buggy. You're going to be
Yeah.
on the road for a week, pack all your provisions, and make it down the road. But applied for this job and drove out there for an interview. I was the first person they'd interviewed that didn't even have a college degree
Uh-huh.
and got the job. And it was crazy. So picked up, moved to Lexington, and just kept going on from there.
That's incredible. I mean, I feel like, I mean, you know a little bit of my experience. I mean, just leaving, I had a bachelor's and a master's, leaving the military, and majority of what jobs want is experience, 5+ years of like good
Yeah.
experience. And I feel like there's this common misconception about how much a degree actually gives you. I feel like it's just kind of like a checkbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's awesome for people to know, because I feel like we're kind of transitioning into a world where people that don't have college degrees and have a plethora of experience are getting more opportunities comparatively so to those who do. And I think that that's pretty awesome because, obviously, notoriously, the kids who went to school have, are anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000 in debt and really have nothing to say for it outside of an internship, that they checked a box because it was required, right? They really got
Yeah.
nothing out of it. Um, I, I,
No.
I, I appreciate that. I look back and I'm like, dang, like I could be not $30,000 in debt right now. I just went, I mean, obviously college athletics was a thing for me, but um, yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. The at some point I was living in Lexington, University of Kentucky's there, and the whole culture in Kentucky, we don't have professional sports.
Sure.
So majority of people, they'll side with like the Steelers or the Bengals or what have you. But the only thing that Kentucky can really pin a point on is Lexington, University
Sure.
of Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah.
So I'm living in Lexington. I'm sitting there like, you know what? I want to be more. I want to make more. So I'm gonna go back to school and finish out my degree in drafting. I'm gonna finish that and then move over to engineering at University of Kentucky. Decent road plan, whatever. And I remember going back to the community college, which you could transfer credits, and I'm sitting there in kind of like an orientation thing, and they're like, "Yeah, you're going to be a drafter. You're going to graduate with this diploma and this certificate and all this stuff, and you're going to make $16 an hour." And I'm sitting there like, I've got a job making 18 just from kind of hustling. Like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And so what I ended up deciding to do was be the last guy that could get fired. That was be as useful as possible, be resourceful, figure out how to do things that not everybody could.
Yeah.
So I had my drafting experience and I did a couple of the drafting classes after I'd been doing it in the real world.
Yeah.
And like the teacher was like, "Oh, you don't do it that way." And then I'd get to the same result, but in a way that you would in the real world, not a way you would in the educational world.
Absolutely.
So I started doing like machining and welding. And I was like, look, if they fire all the office people, I can go out in the warehouse and weld. If they fire all the welding people, I can go over to the CNC machine and do that, right? Like whatever the last job at the place was, I could do it.
Sure.
And you can only get so far doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I made it pretty well. After Big Ass Fans, I did some contract work for like a crane company and some other odd jobs. Like from the time I was little, I had two jobs, like from the time I was five.
Sure.
And like even whenever I was at Big Ass Fans making what around my hometown was a great living, like
Yeah.
above middle class,
Yeah.
um, I was still like on the weekends. I had a buddy that had a grass cutting business. I'd go help him cut grass and do
Sure.
landscaping. Like whatever it was, whatever the money making opportunity was, that's what I went after. And so I did this contract stuff and a little bit of everything else. And while we were at Big Ass Fans, we got to be involved in a lot of interesting projects. And one of them was Big Ass Fans makes literally big ass fans,
Yeah.
anything from like 4 foot to 24 foot in diameter.
Yeah.
And so they said, we're in all these industrial spaces. We're already on the ceiling. Why aren't we making lights? So they went down this long rabbit hole of trying to make this awesome industrial light fixture, and it was really a really cool product.
Yeah.
I remember a marketing thing they did. They took the main engineer's F-350, big Ford pickup truck, and they took the competitor's light fixture and put it across a couple cinder blocks, and they took the big ass light, put it across a couple cinder blocks, and drove the truck up on the light fixtures.
Okay.
Obviously, the competitor just like fell to pieces. The big ass
Yeah.
fan stood there and held this big diesel truck up, and so we got to be involved in a lot of cool stuff like that, learning how to use all kinds of different software and just be as useful as possible.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good to know. I wrote down be the last guy to get fired because I feel like oftentimes in today's world, there's this idea is like kind of stay in your lane, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to like leadership or individuals are maybe threatened by people's ability to do multiple things and cover down for other people. But I feel like that's a really good point because like especially like in what I've learned in the military is the more you know about what your peers do, the more you see and understand what your job is and how it kind of all integrates, how the train links together and then obviously decides to go, right?
Yeah.
But I like that a lot. I think that's super awesome that you said that because oftentimes the mantra is just do what your duty description is and then close the laptop at night and leave or, close the door and leave. So, is that kind of how I know you got your foot in the door with obviously a ton of experience, but you've progressed into, obviously, like you said, sports lighting, and then now the current position you're in now. What would you say um, were the things that made you like a marketable candidate and compared to your peers as far as your experience to get to, a VP of sales and marketing?
So, um, the whole I want to jump back to a comment you made about the being the last guy to get fired.
Yeah,
I complace tons of people say it. I listen to all kinds of podcasts and
yeah,
everybody says complacency is the worst thing or the evil thing or whatever.
yeah,
And I couldn't agree more. And one mentality that I've always adhered to is know your job description, complete your job description, but forget your job description.
sure.
Because I I've got I've got some family who adhere to their job description like to a T. Like you see the guys standing on the roadside holding a shovel because
Yeah,
their portion of it's done, right? And
absolutely.
I can't do that. I can't just stand around and watch work get done and like, oh well, I did my part, So it that's what's really led to all the other opportunities. So after Lexington, after Big Ass Fans, I was looking for a new path, a new direction. I had worked in all these random drafting positions and drawing stuff, and luckily with my being resourceful and figuring stuff out, MacGyvering, so to speak,
Yeah,
I got to do a lot more fun stuff. But um, I wanted to do something more fun,
yeah,
and just out of the blue, me and a buddy, we were hunting for jobs and looking for fun stuff, and he shared with me the search term that he was using, and with that, stumbled upon a job in Austin, Texas, working for a company that did sports lighting. And again, like Big Ass Fans, as a joke, I applied to it because the website we were using, like it was super simple to just like upload your stats and then you could apply to
yeah.
500 jobs in half an
Okay.
hour. Got a call back and they said, hey, will you come down here, check it out, see if you guys want to move? So me and my wife hopped on a plane, went to Austin, Texas, and wound up doing sports lighting. And it was the same thing there. They brought me in, they wanted me to do this specialty drafting, designing fields and foot candle layouts and all this other stuff. And that's not all I did.
Right.
So the opportunity came up that somebody needed to go out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely raised my hand because I could do what I did from anywhere. And luckily, a guy that has been with me the whole time, known him since third grade. He's worked at a lot of these companies with me. We've worked together, and he worked at the same company at the time, so I could leave, leave it in hands that I knew could handle the
Yeah.
job and go do other stuff. And in doing that, the sales part of it came as like I'd leave on a Monday, wouldn't get home until Saturday, and we could only work at night because it's
Mhm.
sports lighting. So it kind of has to be dark out. It's really
Yeah.
helpful if you're trying to do
Yeah.
lighting.
Yeah.
So during the day, I just drive around, knock on doors, say hi to people, and just strike up random conversations. I don't think any of it actually panned out, and especially at that time. Like it was just, hey, how you doing? We do sports lighting, and then they'd be like, hey, get off my lawn, you know.
Yeah.
But figuring out what to say to people and how to extend that conversation is what led to other opportunities. And it was a really fun experience, a really fun place. And it just got to a point where we had a lot of stuff going on back home and we were 20 hours away.
Mhm.
So we decided to move back. And unfortunately, the company I was with wouldn't allow that.
Mhm.
Um, Neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So went to work for a large distribution company that was getting into that space and learned about the whole corporate ladder structure. I mean, like Fortune 500 company.
Sure.
There's the intern to the director to the CEO to all these different people in a publicly trade or not publicly owned company type deal. Um, and quickly realized that wasn't for me. So kept on the sports lighting train, kept trying to figure stuff out, and ended up starting my own company to do sports lighting sales.
Mhm.
I had done it for a second. I knew what needed to be said. I knew how the numbers worked. More importantly, I knew how to do it. Like
Mhm.
if I needed to go out and put a bolt in the air 70 feet in the air, I had already done it.
Sure.
So staying out of that job description led to really the confidence level of I can just do this myself. Why,
Yeah.
why am I doing this for somebody else type
Right.
mentality, which can be dangerous. I'm not saying that's the way to go,
Yeah.
but it definitely opens up more opportunities whenever you're willing to take that leap.
Sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's I enjoy that because, like you said, obviously, your skill set. You think about working for other people and then working for yourself. I feel like there's been times where I've been in that position where I'm like, but the administrative portion is taken care of here, and I can really focus on X, right? Or, hey, yeah, it might be nice for me to, pitch my own softball lessons and get, a facility of my own, but now I'm not really focusing on the lessons. I'm focusing on how am I going to run the facility? How am I going to handle the financials? What happens if X? So yeah, I mean, there's a push and pull to that, I feel like completely. I think when you have the resources at your fingertips, it makes it a little bit easier. But obviously, right place, right time, right?
You'll have to tell me about those resources things because I just kind of throw caution to the wind and use what I got around me to make it happen. We grew up in a location that was the next house was 20 feet away, and you could pull the houses out on wheels, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
um, it wasn't like we called the plumber to fix whatever was
Sure.
wrong, the electrician or what
Yeah,
have you. So it comes from that. So whenever I started my own company to do the
yeah,
sports betting sales, I didn't have the resources. I had enough resources to make sure my insurance was covered and my
yeah,
legal paperwork was done.
yeah.
Everything else on top of that was just okay, what now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a lack of planning. It's the things you don't know are the things you don't know,
Yeah,
and the things you don't know will bite you.
yeah.
So it's just been figuring it all out.
Yeah, I think it's funny you say that because I listened to a portion of John Maxwell's podcast yesterday, like the first 10 minutes, and they were just talking about, the top 10 things you can do to essentially like kickstart your life, right? Things like goal setting, things like it's one thing to write a goal down, but then just to stare at it and not take action. And a lot of people's apprehension comes from failure. And then they even deep dove into things like are you, I always talk to my athletes about being a student of the game, but are you like a student of your business, right? Are you always willing to learn more? But like I think to your point, like a lot of those quote unquote resources comes from or the want to have the secure resources, I say from my standpoint is the fear that it, you know, like it won't work out, right? And I think and I had said that on my business call last night was I'm a big proponent of writing things down and actioning them in worlds that I'm comfortable. But in worlds that I'm uncomfortable, I'm a very big proponent of writing things down and being like, "Ooh, Ashley, that's such a good idea. That's such a good idea." And now I finally put my, you know, I'm trying to take my foot out of my mouth. And I was just telling my boss, I was like, I have a whole whiteboard on here because the thing is, I feel like when it stares me in the face every day, I'm like, all right, I'm starting to feel a little bit guilty. It kind of gives me the kick in the ass that I need. But yeah, I'm a huge proponent of, I would say people are like, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's like a really hard trait for me. I think right now, especially because I'm going through this like identity shift of being in the military full time to more or less being an entrepreneur. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that because you're right. Like what resources, like to a point, you have to kind of take a chance and throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. Obviously, with the idea that it could go either way, right? You're taking a
Yeah.
chance and seeing how it's going to work out. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
it was a complete shot in the dark. It was a exercise in what looks cool between and what is realistic.
sure.
Like, what's my logo going to look like? Not, and it's again those things that you don't know is stuff you don't know, and
Yeah.
um, logo and presentation, all that stuff is very important. But once you have to get to that point, I tried to help a friend of mine build a house, and they were so concerned with what the countertops were going to look like. They didn't know what shape they wanted their house, you know,
Right.
rectangle, square, L shape, whatever. And they couldn't get past the countertops. So the 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 only piece of advice I would have given myself was like hop in the helicopter and fly up high and look at the big picture
Yeah.
and get out of the menial. So like exactly what you were talking about, you go from I want to start this thing to do this thing.
Hmm.
But what ends up happening is you have to do all these other things and then you lose time to do the original thing.
Right.
Like I've since I could turn a key, I've worked on cars
Hmm.
all my entire life. Worked on cars, could never get over paying a mechanic or something for something that I could do. And
Sure.
nothing against mechanics, like they earn their money, but
Yeah.
you know, I could do it myself. I can change my own oil. I've swapped out engines. I've the whole
Hmm.
nine yards. And so it's it's a difficult journey to figure out what that helicopter view looks like over what you really want to do. Because I'd love to work on cars 24/7, but I know as soon as I do that, I'm not going to touch a single car.
Yep, absolutely. No, I agree. Yeah. No, I think yeah, the difference between something that I mean, I think that ultimately like when you talk about jobs versus hobbies, people tend to lean in a little bit more to hobbies because it's not a have to do, right? It's a want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a good balance between, and I'm sure that I'll find that out very soon, a good balance between something that I want to make a hobby or something that is a hobby that I kind of like want to lean into the business side. But how do I balance that out to a point where I still love and enjoy to do it, right?
So there's another podcast I love to listen to, and it's Mike Rowe, the guy from Dirty Jobs and Discovery, all that cool stuff.
Yeah.
And he has a real, I don't know if it's a pain point. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but there's a real specific topic that he has gone down on multiple occasions where a lot of today's youth, and like I've seen it firsthand, my sister does the same thing, where people are pursuing things that they're passionate about,
Yeah.
which is great. If you can make money and make a living doing something you're passionate about, do it.
Mhm.
But there's so much drive to do something you're passionate about that sometimes we lose kind of as a society the things that are important.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to go down a philosophical road, but like same thing with turning a hobby into a job.
Mm-hmm.
Passionate about working on cars, passionate about playing softball and teaching the next generation about softball. But as soon as you take that passion and apply dollars and cents to it, you're no longer passionate about it. And you can go from 100 to zero as quick as you can go from zero to 100 if you just find something that you're good at and
Mm-hmm.
be passionate about that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. No, I like that. That translates into a lot of things. You know, I feel like even like athletes have aspirations to play. You look at like D1, right? There's everyone wants to play D1, you know. But if you flip it the other way, and the goal isn't I want to play D1, it's I just want to be passionate about playing softball, and I kind of land where I'm supposed to land, say physical skill set, academic ability, and then like the overall values I have to of a school, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Graphic of the area, etc. And then the things that I can get my hands on that are going to make me happy in that area, like rock on. I feel like um, business alike, like if I'm going to play at a school, let's say it's a D1 school, and my be all end all was playing at that school D1, and I kind of threw all that other shit out the window. Like 99.9% of the time, I'm going to end up somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept because like you said, it's kind of a balancing act between like, man, I really feel good at this. I feel good about this. And then to flip it and put it into a business mindset, you kind of like you said, you kind of have to ask yourself, am I doing this because I'm good at it, or am I doing it because I'm passionate about it? And maybe it's a little bit of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that translates into to a lot of different things, not necessarily just the business aspect of life. Did you how did you end up getting to Nikao?
Um, so, like I said, went out and started my own sports lighting sales company, and
Yeah.
was working with this new manufacturer. And I was a one man show. I was making the calls, doing the quotes, doing everything. And the manufacturer I was working with said, "Hey, I've got this great guy that does installs that I want you to meet."
Mhm.
And it was the owner of Nikao Group, which had a number of other companies, and did some work together for a couple months, couple 3 months, and finally the owner came to me and was like, "What's it going to take for you to come over here and just do this for us?" The relationship with the manufacturer is changing in a good way, and we need somebody to head up this side of things. And I had, before I started my own company, I had done consulting work. I had helped launch other companies. I had worked as like national manager for all of like a sports lighting division, and
Sure.
just kind of kept tripping forward in
Hmm.
my way of like, oh yeah, I can do that, right? Like if I was standing at a emergency scene and someone was like, here, hold this and cut this open, I'd be like, all right, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
figure it out,
Yeah.
right? Um, so that's kind of what happened. Is it was just a constant falling forward, and before your face hits, you figure out a way to take that next step. And
Yeah.
so that's what I kept doing. And um, the vice president title or whatever, it's a factor of um, recognition in a way that gets you in the door better.
Mhm.
It was never meant to be a title of like authority or a
Sure.
college degree or an MBA, anything like that. It was, if you're making a call, or one of your guys, people, gals, whatever, is making a call and they need to escalate it, it's got to go somewhere.
Sure.
And typically, whenever there's a vice president, president, whatever, on the email signature, you get a different kind of response.
Hmm.
Um, so again, it just snowballed and kept tripping, and owning my own company and navigating that kind of stuff and figuring out what had to be done to manage that and grow it to the point that it got, um, until I got with Nikao Group, was really just a stepping stones
Sure.
and ways to keep from falling on your face.
Yeah.
And the relationship ended with the manufacturer, and the owner of Nikao Group was like, hey, you want to come up to the big leagues and do design, build, construction, all this other stuff that I had never really heard the terms for, because I did architectural work
Yeah.
and technical work, and I had built buildings. I
Yeah.
had done brick and block work, and
Yeah.
we had our own rental properties and had done rehabs that way and stuff, but small fish in comparison.
Sure.
And it was almost like going home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna try this. Let's
Mm-hmm.
see what happens. And it was like, oh, back on the job site with Papal. I'm, back in the architectural firm. And whenever I was at the architectural firm, I was like, yeah, this is what I want. I want to draw buildings and
Mm-hmm.
do that kind of stuff. And then I found out how much college costs and that I could make more money,
Yeah.
kind of hustling,
Yeah.
and the level of entry that it takes to do some of those jobs. Like one of the schools I was looking at, it was like 4,500 to 5,000 people apply each year, and they take 100.
Yeah.
And it's like, I I I could probably beat all of them. Absolutely. 100%, no problem.
Sure.
But am I going to?
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that makes sense. It's to be honest, I like how you said, kind of falling forward until you fall on your face, for better or for worse, right? Like you kind
Yeah.
of should say falling forward until you fall where you're supposed to be. Because um, I've had multiple conversations with people just as I continue to transition out of the military full time, is like I'm literally reinventing myself and reinventing my career, in my early 30s, and people are like, that's not a big deal, right? And to be honest, like you look at it and you're like, big picture, sure, like you see people reinvent themselves all the time, but when you have this idea, and I think that that's often what like causes people to be apprehensive about themselves. You have this idea of what life is going to look like. You actually do yourself a disservice by way of, like, you don't fall forward. You're hesitant to fall forward because you're afraid of what falling on your face might look like. And at the end of the day, it could be really positive. And it sounds like in your case it was, kind of having these experiences between jobs and being able to turn a wrench, but also being in a consulting position where you're launching companies. Like, they're very different, opposite end of the spectrum, but I feel like you turning the wrench is what got you to be able to consult companies and tell them how to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the difference between a button up with your name on one side and the company on the other, and you're replacing a motor, and the guy
Yeah,
in the office with a polo, it is just a vocabulary change.
sure.
It's nothing more than, I don't I've interviewed a number of people. If they went to college, great. If they didn't, great. It doesn't matter the person and what they're willing to do, and the level of, not necessarily commitment, because one I, we never strive for anything but a work life balance.
Sure.
If you got to take your kids to the doctor on a Monday when a bid's due, so be it. Like that,
Yep.
take
Yep.
care of the kid first.
Yep.
But finding the people that are willing to go the extra mile
Mhm.
is way more important than the education or the background. In a lot of instances, the character and the personality is really what drives companies, especially like ours, forward. Is having that close knit group that can work together towards an end goal. Because if it's just a amalgamation of degrees, you're going to get a result. It
Sure.
might not be the one you're looking for, because there's too many specialties fighting for priority.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I like what you said about the work-life balance, because I think now more than ever people are really looking for that, right? And and I think that that's kind of like a game changer for some people, and it pigeonholes people into to applying for certain jobs, right? But to your point about, you know, the character, the drive of the person, et cetera, I think, um, for a long time, I said, I sent in resume after resume after resume, and I was like, if I could just get in front of somebody, I know for a fact that I would be able to sell them that I'm a good candidate. Um, and I think it speaks volumes to, the company that you work for and your mindset, because there's a lot of great candidates that are being overlooked. Same thing that I feel like oftentimes it's the same thing with college athletics, right? For instance, when we were talking about kind of like having an overall end goal and kind of just falling on your face away there. Like I had an athlete who um wanted to play for the University of Alabama. That was like her be all end all. And she's like, I will do whatever it takes to get in front of that head softball coach, Pat Murphy. And I want to be in front of him, and I want to get the opportunity to play. She's bullpen catching for the University of Alabama. And they're thinking about giving her an opportunity if it works out,
Mhm.
to play on the team. And I think that's a tribute to her character. She didn't get where she was just by the statistics or the emailing that she did between coaching staff to players. She got on campus and was like, I'm gonna meet this guy and I'm gonna show that I'm a good quality human being. And at the end of the day, like I don't care what role I play, kind of what you were saying before. I don't care what role I play. I could be picking up garbage, picking up balls, whatever it may be. I just want to be a part of something big, right? I want to be a part of
Yeah.
something. And I feel like that's the kind of misconception, all the aesthetics that go and associated with whether it be jobs or whether it be, college athletics. The aesthetics are oftentimes the flashy things that um people gravitate towards and kind of miss the boat on all the other stuff.
When it comes to so many things, it gets drilled down to, black and white, binary, zero or one, pass, fail, what have you.
Yeah.
And if you choose to be passionate about something, great.
Hmm.
Let it be binary. Let it be pass, fail.
Right.
But you better be ready for absolute success or complete and total failure. Whereas most things begin out and should be looked at from the gray area,
Hmm.
because we've constantly looked for these door openings, or one door closes, another door opens. If one door closes, there's 47 other ones that also got closed, and another
Yeah.
100 that are standing wide open that are in your peripheral. But if you're so tunnel visioned, you just can't see them. And that's, like I said, I started out brick and block laying and then worked at an architectural firm. And okay, there's a correlation there. But then I went to mining and machinery equipment, and then big ass fans, and then sports lighting. And now we're doing these design build projects where we're taking antique facilities that every other contractor in the world looks at and says, pull out the bulldozer. And we're like, no, we can save it.
Hmm.
Put a steel beam here, save those bricks, wash them, let's reuse them on this, that, or the other thing, turn it into some beautiful centerpiece, whatever it might be. It's an appreciation of what's around in that gray area.
Hmm.
It's not just black and white.
Yeah, it's how do we get to yes, right? Like
Yeah.
it may look like this, or this may be the process, or it may take longer, but how do we get to yes?
Mm-hmm.
I think that separates companies and people from other people significantly.
Plant your roots, but be ready to pivot when the wind changes.
Yeah, I like
Like,
that.
know your foundations, stand firm, stand tall, but with an open ear and open eyes. Things are going to change. The world keeps spinning, the moon keeps coming up, and the sun keeps going down, depending on which way you look at it.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
um, you know, nothing's concrete, not even concrete. It'll fall apart eventually.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So what kind of as I know we've talked a little bit about this, like how it's kind of like shaped you, your experience has kind of shaped you as a human being. And I think there's something really organic and authentic about your experience that kind of leads you up toward till now. Like you have a very great perception on things in comparison to other people, by way of like uh a lot of people, like we talked about, will act in fear based on the caution of hey, this isn't going to work out because of this, right? They're very methodical and quote unquote strategic thinking. What would you say like lessons that you've learned that have kind of stuck with you by, like living in that gray area and ultimately ending up here?
Um, there's two big ones. First one is always be competitive,
Mm-hmm.
and not in a not in a demeaning sense, and
Sure.
not in a way to necessarily demoralize the opponent, but always be willing to win the game. Always be willing to adjust the play, call an audible, whatever, to stay competitive. Because if you plant your roots too hard, then the wind's going to knock you over.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to go with it. And the other one is just kind of don't. And a lot of people say this, but don't waste your time on the ones that don't. Um, you got to find the right person to ride along with you. You got to keep those ride or die people
Yeah.
always in the passenger seat. Where hey, we got to wake up at 5 a.m. and drive 8 hours to work for 12, and then maybe we'll get paid.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of mentality, and you gotta keep the people around that are yes. They said yes, before you. Hey, what are you doing this weekend? I don't know. What are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
there's so keep the right people around and always be competitive.
No, I like that. It's funny. And I always can, like when you're talking about being competitive and kind of like being able to throw an audible and stuff like that, we call them in the athletic world, we call them gamers, right? Like be a gamer.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's a lot, and like I said, even to my character right now, like there's a lot of people that are just they operate every day in fear, but also I told one of my coworkers in the military, I said, um, because I listened to this podcast about how if you tell somebody about a big idea that you have, oftentimes you won't continue forward because you'll take whatever opinion they give you and apply it to whatever your idea is, right? So like you were saying, to your point about surrounding yourself with people who are gamers, right? Like who are willing
Mhm.
to audible with you, to change direction, whatever it may be. I think that plays a huge role. People that want to pigeonhole you, oftentimes you find yourself later on at failure, right? And maybe not because of you, but maybe because of somebody, or vice versa, right? The people you surround yourself with.
Yeah, and as long as you stay passionate, you might find yourself in even a worse position where okay, now you've had someone that has disappointed you for whatever reason, and you got to pick up the ball because you're not going to let someone else be the cause of your failure. And
Absolutely.
now you get into the work life balance of there was a time I can one of my favorite holidays is July 4th.
Hmm.
Don't have to buy presents,
Yeah.
get a smoke some meat on the thing or whatever,
Yeah.
and go watch fireworks and just relax and chill. There's no stressful thing other than are the hot dogs done,
Hmm.
right? And work had to get done, and we had to work on July 4th because of somebody else.
Yep.
And so be it. Oh well. I'm but is planting your roots and not shifting in the wind going to be the cause of your failure?
Mm-hmm.
And it was 100% somebody else's fault, but that wasn't good enough.
Hmm. No, I like that. We tend, I feel like, as humans, to have the mindset um, of drastic negative thinking, especially when somebody flicks something negative on us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it negatively impacts us, whether it be, like you said, somebody dropped the ball on something, you having to cover for someone, etc. Like, at the end of the day, like it is what it is, right? I think it goes the same in athletics, right? Oftentimes, and even from a coaching perspective, you often find coaches blaming games on umpires, or coaches uh players blaming certain plays, or even on themselves, right? Like, oh man, it was, runners on 0-2, and all I had to do was get a single, right, in order to score the run. and our approach is like our at the end of the day, our game should not be to determine based on one play, right? And I think life works like that too. The overall perception um that there's more than one solidifying event that causes an effect, right? Um,
Mhm.
I think it's an interesting way to approach things, and oftentimes we have tunnel vision in doing so. But um, I like, I kind of like you said, like don't if you stick your roots in, you're gonna get blown over, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, just don't actually apply that to trees because they can be wind shook and still have
Yeah,
problems. It's one of those gray area metaphors.
yeah,
Don't take it black and white. Yeah, it's you can walk down the street and find 1,000 people that can point out the problem.
yep.
That's you are not going to have one bit of trouble finding somebody that can identify an issue.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to have trouble finding is somebody with a solution.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that. I like that. Yeah, it's because so many people are problem based oriented and not solution based oriented. I like that a lot. Before we end, what I mean, let's say just an average human being, especially with the way the world is today, when you say, be competitive and the job area, and I say, be a gamer, what would you recommend now, even just having your experience of interviewing people and regularly talking with people? What are those intricate things that you look for, just in, I would say, even candidates, or even in you guys call them clients or customers or whatever you're right, that
Yeah.
truly tells somebody that, or can tell you that somebody's not transactional, they're true to their convictions, they're a man or woman of their word. um you know what, I guess, makes you shake hands at the end of a meeting with somebody versus being like, that's not somebody I want to work with.
Um, that's if it's strictly pass fail, especially with a client, it just is what it is. You go with your gut. You're gonna. There's no answer to that.
Sure.
We're gonna get burned. It's gonna happen. Do your best to plan for getting burned. Keep the burn ointment around. Keep it close and let it happen. And that's gonna help you develop that gut instinct of whether it works or not. Um, but as far as continued relationships, because like you can go find a supplier and you could purchase things from them today. Their reaction to your purchase or the problems that might happen after that is what's going to dictate if you continue to bring them business.
Hmm.
And it works the same way with people coming to you for business. What's the risk and reward? What's the pass fail criteria? There's way too many caveats and variables to go into something from the get go. Shia LaBeouf,
Yeah,
the actor from Even Stevens and all
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
he's done a lot of other good stuff. He was talking about like going through all his trials and tribulations, and he tells a great story about a farmer who they farmed onions or something like that, and they only got to keep 10%, and they bought a horse, and the horse was doing all the work, and the horse ran off one day, and the son looked at him and said, oh, this is terrible, the world's going to end. And the dad goes, I can't call it yet. And then the horse comes back and it brings 10 other horses, and the son's like, oh, this is great, we're in the horse business now. And the son's trying to tame one of the horses, and it breaks the kid's leg, and they can't farm, they can't deal with the horses, and the people from the town come and say, oh, this is terrible. And the dad goes, I can't call it yet. And then like the military shows up, and they're like, we need your son to go off, and like they're conscripting him into war. And they're like, oh, you can't take him, his legs are busted up, he can't walk. And the guy in the soldier, he's like, oh, that's terrible, you're not going to bring honor to your family. And the dad's like, I can't call it yet. And then they all get, bad battle times, whatever, his son might not have made it back, and they're like, oh, isn't it great that he didn't go off to war with them.
yeah.
And it's just there's nobody has a crystal ball. You can't call it yet. So learn from your mistakes, but don't don't sit and reflect on them. Just catalog them away and deal with them at the time and then move on.
Yeah, no, that's super awesome. I think a lot of people at the site of failure or at the site of one hiccup are often kind of like, nope, you know,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And I think it's notorious in just people, right? People don't want to genuinely can or feel like they're genuinely continuing to fail. Um, but I think perception, it's funny because in the military they always say perception is reality, and I disagree, right? I think perception is often not reality. And to your point, with Shia LaBeouf's story is perception was that life was going to end,
Mhm.
and continuously back to back, things kind of fluctuated. It was this roller coaster of highs and lows, and then that's just life, I feel like.
In changing directions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. This has been super awesome. I think this applies to not just business, but just life in general. And it's been super awesome. I mean, obviously, I know just before this, I knew a little bit about you, but um, it's been fantastic knowing that um, there's hope for the world of just people that, you like you said, hard workers, competitive workers, gamers, people that genuinely want to learn, and take opportunities that are thrown at them, whether or not they, like you said, have a crystal ball to see what the overall outcome can be. I think that gives hope for the rest of us that we can actually throw at some points we can throw shit at a wall and see what sticks.
Oh, absolutely. Every time. It's just somebody might yell at you about doing
Yeah,
it, you know.
absolutely.
And I'll leave you on this one.
Yeah.
I my father-in-law, he passed away a few years back, but his favorite go-to saying was, "What's the worst they can do? Kill you and eat you?"
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
like whenever you think about it all in that mindset, like whether you're going into business and submitting massive bids to municipalities or big businesses to do work for them, or if you're just going to interview for your first job at McDonald's, what's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody says no. If you're afraid of failure, then go back to bed.
Yep, absolutely.
Just there's way more important things to be afraid of in the world.
Yeah.
And if you find a solution to those things you're afraid of, the fear becomes a little less.
Hmm.
Nothing's going to make any of it go away. Nothing's going to make drastic changes. But what is going to happen is you're going to become a person that can deal with things. And that's worth way more than a piece of paper a lot of times.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think it's going to be more the mentality of I get hit, like, all right, hit me, I'll be ready to be hit again versus like here,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You still have this open mindset of I'll be like, I'm likely going to get hit again, but I'm just going to get back up and keep going.
If you get hit, you better be ready to take the whatever's coming out of your nose and wipe it under your eyes to block the glare and keep
Yeah,
punching back because
absolutely.
your other option is to lay there and take it, and that's not a good solution in any scenario.
Absolutely. That's super awesome. I really appreciate you sharing, obviously your history and your take on things. I think it's provided a really unique perspective, even for me, of just that there's these, like you said, check boxes that while they exist, like I think that almost like tunnel visions us to we have this misconception of what life should look like or how we can approach life, and it's not really it at all. Like you said, there's a point where you can live in a gray area. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate sharing.
Unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or something that needs a specific license, the
Yeah,
only box you got to check is your own, and the rest
yeah,
of it's up to you to prove to the world that you can do it. So
absolutely.
just get out of bed and do it.
Yeah. And oftentimes it's not always about how you check the boxes, it's whether or not you do. Like you look at, I just started binge watching the show Suits. And
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
these lawyers are just savage, right? They're checking the boxes, but no one really needs to know how, right? Same with the methods and approaches to medicine and just doctors in general, right? Like, um, yeah, I think to a point they're checking boxes, but the methods and the ways they go about it might be different. So,
Oh, absolutely. It's
well,
it's it's no different than those like if you go to a drafter, he's gonna draft you something. He's just gonna draw something based on past experience. If you go to an engineer, he's gonna pull out his calculator. If you go to a
yeah,
construction guy, he's gonna say a few choice words and then tell you how it's supposed to be done. You know,
yeah,
like
that's true.
depending on what specialty you go to is what answer you're gonna get. So um, look for those second opinions, formulate your own, and then understand that opinions are different and the wind's gonna change.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and
Yeah,
it
thanks
was
so much
fun.
for coming on.